Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Lloyd and I source cars for people on a professional basis. Although most of the cars I source are between £1,000 and £5,000, very often I've been asked to show something a little bit cheaper on the channel, and so I came up with No Budget Reviews, the series where we look at cars that you can buy in good condition with an MOT for under £1,000 and you can enjoy driving. We don't film this in an expensive manner, we don't use separate microphones, we don't use fluid head tripods, we don't even use a DSLR, but we do have a lot of fun.
Here's a question for you viewers. If you've owned 5 Maestros in a row and you realise you need a new car and the Maestros are getting a bit old, what exactly do you replace it with? Well, in my grandfather's case, one of these. You've seen we've had a number of Maestros on the channel, but we've not had too many Ford Escorts. In fact, we've only had one Ford Escort, which is quite remarkable considering how much of a part of the motoring life these cars were in this country for years. I seem to remember, even when this car was new in 1993, that they were still the best-selling car in Britain. This is a 1.6 LX. This is a what's called a Mark 5B, a very sort of thoroughly revised version of the original Mark 5 that came out to critical disappointment in 1990. I really like this rear spoiler, I like the wheel trims, I like the fact that the lower part of the car is actually painted differently. It's very typical of this era. The Rover R8s were like this too at the time. A lot of those were two-tone. I prefer the front end of these as well to the earlier cars. It's just a very nice package. You could get these with air conditioning as well. LX is everything that you need. I mean, I personally would prefer a gear, but you know, it's just the way that I am. Here we see the revised rear lights that came in about September 1992, the Mark 5Bs, with the 16 valve engine, which is known as the Zeta SE or Duratec or Sigma. There's all three names have been used over the course of a long time, and this engine went right the way through to the I believe the Mark III Focus as well. So we use the key to open this up. I don't think there is an internal boot release. Reproduction dealer plates as well, which is what we like to see, and an awful lot of sort of service history and things like that in here. Just all sorts of things, all the way right back to when the car was new, which I'm not going to show too much because I don't want to give away too much information. Underneath here, well, apart from a good old Metro stop lock, I used to have one of those. Full-size spare wheel, of course. Reasonably practical boot. This feels a little bit deeper than one in an R8 200 actually, which of course is a car I'm very familiar with and was a direct rival to this. For a long time, you know, they did compete in the same market. Although the thing I've noticed straight away is the fact that unlike in an R8, the rear of the seats, which is quite clearly showing that you can fold them 60/40, hasn't got any carpeting on it, which is just a little bit of a cost-cutting measure, I'm sure. But it's not too bad. You'd expect with an Essex plate like this, the car might have been supplied by Ford UK or something when new, but it wasn't. It was supplied by a dealer in Essex to its original owner. Oh, a wonderful t-shirt. Lloyd Vehicle Consulting t-shirts are available. If you click on the link in the description below and order one. I've still got some left. Let's move that bit out of the way. This is my driving position. It's got a cover on the seat. And I'm about 5'11", but I've actually got, you know, enough room in here. Headlining a bit like an R8 200 is also sagging a little bit because that's what they do too. My head is okay though. I've actually got enough knee room, and you can put your feet underneath the seats too. There's also that remote boot release I was talking about just there. There's no central armrest in this model or headrest. I think if you went up to the gear or something, you'd probably get stuff like that. Only one ashtray, bizarrely. I think there would have been two, but you only get one on the left-hand side of the car for some reason. No electric rear windows in this model, but I don't think you would really need these in a 1990s family car. I think most of the 90s family cars only came with electric rear windows anyway. Some obviously had only manual rear windows. Some obviously had the all four windows, but you think something like this, you wouldn't expect that. It's a little bit on the sort of utilitarian side. I mean, the back of the seats, I remember this from my grandfather's car, are just hard plastic, which is a bit sort of mean in a way. And I remember this sort of sunroof cover that comes with this manual sunroof. It reminds me of, for one, of the sort of Mark IV Orion. It might be different actually, it might not be the same, but it just reminds me of that. And also these sort of blue door tops. It's very blue inside here. It's very typical kind of early 90s blue interior like this. I quite like it though. I quite like the design of the fabric and everything. And you've got blue seat belts as well. Right, let's take a seat in the front. Apologies about the wind noise, viewers. We are right by the coast here. Again, this dashboard really takes me back. It's exactly the same as would have been in my grandfather's Mark 5B Escort. His was a darker blue than this, and I think it was a 1.4 LX, so a little bit different. You didn't get in that one. I don't think any rear spoilers or anything like that, or these fancy wheel trims. The car's actually just about to turn over 100,000 miles. It's funny how in 1993 Ford didn't believe that their products would last over 100,000 miles. The clock apparently is quite a common thing to fail. In this one it's not working. It's not a huge problem though, really. No airbags in this particular car. Those didn't come until the 1994 model year, so a couple of months after this car was made. Side impact bars though in here, the body shell was significantly changed actually to be safer in the 1992 facelift. Very simple controls, and the only thing I'm missing here, and some Alexas did have air conditioning, this one doesn't have it. I don't know what these blank switches over here are for. I presume one of those would be front fog lamps. I'm not sure what the other one would be. I think the rear electric windows, if the car had them, would be in the middle of there. This has only got front ones, and of course it's easy to change those from left to right hand drive. Door pockets are quite generous for holding an awful lot of cassettes. I mean, like, an awful lot of cassettes. Got even more cassettes in here. Clearly we are in the correct era for this car. The original Ford radio of the type would have been supplied with this car new, and you can very easily pull those cassettes in and out because there's a bit of space between them. Thought we had a little storage compartment there, but we don't. That's it's not very much. There's that boot release and seat controls. I think my secret mesh dockets would go in there, viewers, but I'd have to put them around the other way. And we've got some cup holders in there too. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward for an early 90s car in terms of the dash. And of course we've got this, one of my favourite things about Fords of this era is the little hazard switch. Let's take a look under the bonnet. So in this particular car, it actually tells you it's a 1.6 injection engine with twin overhead cams developing 90 horsepower, the so-called Zeta SE. Originally the Zeta engine, but then Fiat and Lancia said they couldn't use that name, so the Z-Tech engine. SE was added on to the latest to differentiate it from all these trim levels and things. Electronic fuel injection, of course. This car has got power steering, which is brilliant. That coolant reservoir was in a lot of Fords. We can even see things like the gearbox down there, so Engine access is reasonably easy. These are still cars that are quite easy to find parts from. I mean, this engine was in production until I think a few years ago. You might even be able to still buy these as crate engines and things, because they go into caterings and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so much better than the old CVH engine that this replaced. And I have tried in an Escort Mark III, which was in October last year. And yeah, I didn't like the sound of that Viewers very much. This one's a lot better. These do have a cam belt on them, I believe, and so you've got to make sure you change the cam belt at the right intervals. But apart from that, they're pretty reliable, really. Okay, let's go for a drive.
So here we are, viewers, going along the A259 South Coast Road. We're just sort of near Brighton today. It's really interesting to be driving one of these because they were sort of everywhere in the 1990s, they were everywhere in the 2000s, and you honestly don't see many Mark V Escorts at all. You might see some Mark VIs from time to time, but not the Mark Vs. Certainly the ride that was complained about when these cars were launched in 1990 doesn't actually seem too bad to me. It seemed absolutely fine. With this 1.6 Zeta SE engine, it's actually reasonably refined. The main thing that I'm sort of hearing is a few sort of rattles from where Jonathan has taken the dashboard apart a few times, which is probably what you might hear. But really, for a car that's getting on to 30 years old, it's not that bad. I'm very grateful to have power steering in this one. Power steering was an option on, or standard on most trims of the Mark V Escort. Oh, there's that dashboard rattle. Doesn't like this hill very much. Yeah, the engine's fine. The car's going up no problem. It's just the dashboard doesn't like the hill. It's being resonance frequency or something. The steering, I was hydraulic, of course, from a car of this era, and gearbox is not bad either. Actually, it's a little bit long on the throw. It's a bit longer on throw than I was expecting, actually, but it's still pretty good. Clutch is nice and easy. Ooh, pretty resonant frequency there. So when the car was launched in 1990, the base engine, and that continued all the way through the Mark V production life, was a 1.3. I think they called it the Endura E engine or something, Valencia engine or Kent engine. There's loads of different names essentially as it went through its life. OHV engine, developing 60 horsepower. Following that, there was a 1.4. That was a good old CVH engine, which I'm not the biggest fan of. That developed 70 horsepower. Then there were a couple of 1.6 CVH engines developing 90 and 105 horsepower, and that was it on the launch of the car. In 1991, a couple of the new Zetec SE engines, as they I think are referred to these days, or Sigma or Duratec, it sort of depends exactly what year it is. They appeared with 105 and 130 horsepower in the XR3i. About that time as well, the RS 2000 appeared, that had 150 horsepower, and then in 1992 everything started to change. They got rid of the CVH engines and they developed this absolutely brilliant 1.6 Zetec SE with 90 horsepower. By the time of the facelift, this car is August 93. I think the facelift was September 92. Time of the facelift came out, all the engines got fuel injection, even the 1.3. They kept 1.3 and 1.4, but they then eventually expanded the 1.8. 213 horsepower, I think it was. I think they dropped the 2XR3Is for some reason. Right at the top of the range, and not actually getting the facelift at all, because it wasn't actually based on an Escort platform. It was based on a Sierra platform. Was the crazy RS Cosworth. That developed 227 horsepower. There were also some diesels, but as usual, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. Normally, viewers, I have to warn you about a slightly sort of kind of jiggly mount and the fact that it's in the way. But today, I obviously advise you as well of the resonant frequency of this dashboard, which seems to be interesting. We would go into the trim levels at this point in this video, but I can't, because I cannot believe how many trim levels there were for a Mark 5 Escort. Some of them overlap with the Mark 6, which was a very heavily facelifted version of this car that came out in 1995. Although stocks of the Mark 5 did last, in some cases, until 1997. I've realised just by driving this car why somebody like my grandfather, who had one of these after a string of 5 Maestros, might want to get one. And it's just a nice kind of simple and unfussy car to drive. It's nothing particularly fancy, but in this particular trim, with a little spoiler and the nice wheel trims and the two-tone paint and in this colour, it does look very nice. Of course, we've got this blue interior, which is ever so typical of cars of this period. I think if I'd been driving the Kent or the CVH version, I wouldn't really enjoy the sort of noise that they make so much. But this C-Tech SE is very good, and they did really sort of ride handling out to the extent that when the Mark 6 was launched in 1995, it was actually quite well regarded. Wow, didn't think I'd see a 20s Bentley coming along here today. That's extraordinary. Seats seem pretty comfortable as well. It's very good. I think definitely go for a model with power steering if you are going to get one of these. Maybe air conditioning, that was an option on a lot of them. I think even on this LX trim there was an air conditioning model available. Yes, I've really quite enjoyed this view. Jonathan does use this car on a very frequent basis, and I understand why entirely he would do that. It feels like a very easy thing to live with. Apparently a lot of the parts are still quite cheap. I mean, the biggest problem with these, like so many other cars at the time, is rust. But this one's not got any rust on it, which is really good. Let's now look at some Ford Escort Mark 5 trim levels. There's an awful lot of them, so bear with me, viewers. The Pop, the Encore, the Fresco 2, the just a 1.3 base level, the Quartz 2, the RS2000, the RS2000 4x4, the Acapulco, the Cabaret, the Freedom, the Serenade, the Chicane, the Duet, GLX, LX, Gear, Sapphire, Aura, L Business, CL, Mistral, Bonus, S, SI, Mexico, XR3i, and of course RS Cosworth. There are also cabriolet versions of the Mark 5, estate versions of the Mark 5. This is a 5-door hatch. There was a 3-door hatch. There's the Orion, which was the saloon version, which was renamed the Escort in September 1993. So really one of these for virtually everyone you can imagine. and they were built all over the place. Halewood, where this car was made, which is at sort of near Liverpool, and then in Spain, Germany, Brazil, and Turkey. The Brazilian cars sometimes had Volkswagen engines, which is very strange. That's just the way that it was. There was also a 75 brake horsepower version of the 1.4 CVH with injection that I forgot to mention earlier on. So viewers, the Mark 5 Escort, particularly this B version of facelift, is this something that you should consider with your hard-earned budget of up to £1,000? Well, Jonathan's done a bit of work to this car, and it's probably worth a little bit more than £1,000 now. The condition of it is actually really good, apart from this rattle from the dashboard. But yeah, these are quite usable everyday modern classics actually. Particularly these later ones with the better engines and better safety and more equipment and a stronger body shell. They are the ones to go for, I think. The earlier ones, probably not so much. Although with such little choice around, perhaps maybe you'd like to have a basic 1.3L from 91 or something like that. Some people probably are really into that kind of thing. I prefer the more luxury end of things, as you probably know, and so I'd go for probably a gear. Maybe one of those Orion gears with the rear wiper. Yes, viewers, they did make Orion gears with a rear wiper. Wonderful. Anyway, thank you ever so much indeed to Jonathan for lending the car for review, and thank you ever so much indeed for watching this episode of No Budget Reviews. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, to like this video, and to leave a comment below. It really does help. And yes, social media links are down below, and thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching.